Tennessee's lakefront real estate industry does not want you to see this video because in these 7 lake towns you can still buy a house under $80,000 while the state median sits near $383,000. And I'm going to be straight with you in the first 30 seconds because you're making a real decision. Under $80,000 does not buy you lakefront. Anywhere. Not on these lakes, not on any lake in this state. What it buys is a house in a lake town, 5, 10, 15 minutes from water, you can use every day of your life for free. And once you understand why that's the better purchase anyway, this entire list opens up. So I drove all 7. And I found a town that was flooded on purpose and refused to disappear. A lake named after a Charles Dickens novel by a postmaster who liked it. A factory that has been pouring iron in the same building since 1896. And a river crossing where the Trail of Tears began. If you want the real numbers on lake living, hit that subscribe button now because we're counting all 7 down and you do not want to miss number 1. Let's count it down. Number 7, Bean Station, Tennessee. When I first drove into Bean Station, I was in Granger County with Cherokee Lake spread out below the road and mountains standing behind it. And the first thing I noticed was how little of the shoreline had anything built on it. That's the whole opportunity here. Cherokee Lake runs about 30,000 acres with a long, irregular shoreline, and Granger County is one of the more affordable counties in East Tennessee. Under $80,000 here buys you an older house in town or a modest place on a county road with a few minutes drive to a boat ramp. Not a dock, not a view, but real access. And here's why the off-water house is the smarter buy, which is the through line of this entire video. Cherokee is a TVA flood control reservoir, which means it holds high in summer and draws down substantially through the winter. Buy on the water and you own a mudflat view for part of every year, plus higher insurance, plus the maintenance of a dock. Buy 10 minutes back and you get the same lake on the same days for a fraction of the price and none of the exposure. Same water, half the cost, none of the drawdown. Now, here's the wild card fact about Bean Station. Granger County is genuinely famous across the state for its tomatoes, grown in this specific valley soil, sold at stands all summer, and celebrated with a festival that draws tens of thousands of people to a county of 23,000. A county known nationally for a vegetable. Here's your takeaway. On any TVA lake, ask what winter pool is before you ask what the house costs. If the shoreline moves hundreds of feet every January, the waterfront premium you'd be paying only buys you 8 months of view. Number 6, Decatur, Tennessee. When I first drove into Decatur, I was in Meigs County, one of the smallest populations in Tennessee, with Watts Bar Lake wrapping the county on 2 sides and almost nobody around to look at it. Then I drove out to the ferry crossing and the trip got heavier. The money here is genuinely striking. Meigs County has almost no market pressure because there's no interstate, no city, and no employer pulling people in. Under $80,000 buys an older home in or near Decatur, and you're minutes from a lake that runs nearly 40,000 acres with hundreds of miles of shoreline. Cheap because nobody came. Not cheap because everybody left. That distinction is worth understanding because it determines what happens to your money. A town that's cheap because the mill closed has a shrinking population, a falling tax base, and no buyer for your house in 12 years. A town that's cheap because no highway was ever built through it is simply undiscovered, and Meigs County is squarely the second kind, sitting between Chattanooga and Knoxville, with a substantial lake on it and no particular reason anybody would have noticed. Undiscovered is a temporary condition. Declining is not. The practical caution is real, though. There's no hospital in Meigs County. Athens and Dayton are each roughly half an hour. Chattanooga is about an hour. If you're managing an ongoing condition, drive that route yourself before you decide anything, in the dark and in the rain. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Decatur. Blythe Ferry, right here, is where thousands of Cherokee people crossed the Tennessee River in 1838 at the start of the forced removal now known as the Trail of Tears. The last Cherokee council on their own homeland met near this crossing. There's a memorial park at the site today with the names of the removal-era families recorded on it. The beginning of one of the darkest chapters in this country's history. On a quiet county road. Here's your takeaway. In counties this small, get the ambulance response time to your specific address in writing before you buy. Not the county average. Your address. Number 5, Granville, Tennessee. When I first drove into Granville, I thought somebody had rebuilt a town from a photograph. Jackson County, on the shore of Cordell Hull Lake, about 100 people, and a main street that looks the way main streets looked in 1930. That's not an accident, it's a decision this town made. Granville was going to disappear, the way a lot of small river towns did after the lake came in. Instead, the community restored the buildings and turned itself into a heritage destination. A preserved general store, a museum, restored houses, a working theater, and events that pull visitors in from all over Middle Tennessee. People here call it the Mayberry of Tennessee, and they mean it as a strategy, not a joke. A town of 100 people that refused to close. The money, Jackson County is among the least expensive in the state, and under $80,000 is a genuine budget here rather than a stretch. Cordell Hull Lake is a Corps of Engineers reservoir, which matters. Large stretches of that shoreline are federally owned and can never be developed by anyone. Your view is protected by an act of Congress rather than by a neighbor's good intentions. And a town this small has an advantage that only becomes obvious after 75. Everything in Granville is within a few hundred yards of everything else. When the day comes that one of you would rather not drive, a town you can cross on foot is worth more than any amenity a bigger place can offer, and that day arrives in almost every retirement on a schedule nobody chooses. Now, here's the wildcard fact about this area. Cordell Hull, the lake's namesake, grew up in these hills. He served as Secretary of State longer than anyone in American history, was a principal architect of the United Nations, and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1945. A Nobel Peace Prize, out of Jackson County, Tennessee. Here's your takeaway. Corps of Engineers lakes are the most underrated thing in American waterfront. Before you buy anywhere near water, find out who owns the far shore. Federal ownership means your view is permanent in a way no private arrangement can match. Number 4. South Pittsburg, Tennessee. When I first drove into South Pittsburg, I could smell the foundry before I found it. Marion County, sitting on Nickajack Lake in the Tennessee River Gorge, with the Cumberland Plateau rising straight up on both sides. This is the most dramatic setting on the list, and one of the cheapest. Marion County housing runs well below the state average, and under $80,000 buys a real house in town here. Older, needing work, but standing and solid. Nickajack is a narrow river lake rather than a broad reservoir, which means it behaves more like a river. Less drawdown, more consistent, and stunning to look at with the gorge walls standing over it. And Chattanooga is about 40 minutes away. That's the piece that makes this work. A full medical system, an airport, and everything a city provides without a city's prices. The gorge itself is worth naming as an asset because it's genuinely rare. This is the stretch where the Tennessee River cuts straight through the Cumberland Plateau, and the walls stand roughly 1,000 feet over the water on both sides. It's some of the most striking country in the eastern United States, and the reason it stayed cheap is simply that the terrain never allowed the kind of sprawl that drives prices up elsewhere. Cheap because of geology, not because of decline. Now, here's the wildcard fact about South Pittsburg. Lodge cast iron has been manufacturing here since 1896. If you own a cast iron skillet, there's a strong chance it was poured in this town. And every spring, South Pittsburg hosts the National Cornbread Festival, which is exactly what it sounds like and draws tens of thousands of people to a town of about 3,000, 130 years of skillets, and a festival about cornbread. Here's your takeaway. A town with a working factory that has survived a century is a town with a tax base, a payroll, and a reason to exist. That is a materially different proposition from a cheap town with nothing in it, and it shows up in whether your house is worth anything in 15 years. If you're learning things about Tennessee lakes nobody puts in the listings, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people running the same numbers. Number 3. Counce, Tennessee. When I first drove into Counce, I understood why people who know Pickwick don't talk about it much. Hardin County, the far southwest corner of the state, where Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama meet, and a lake that most of Middle Tennessee drives right past on its way east. Pickwick Lake covers about 43,000 acres with roughly 496 miles of shoreline. Let that number sit. 496 miles. That's more shoreline than most people imagine when they picture a lake, and it's the reason the water here never got scarce enough to be priced like a luxury. Now the money, honestly. Actual lakefront on Pickwick is not cheap. It's a genuine second home market, and it's priced like one. But Counce itself is an unincorporated community where the cost of living runs slightly below the Tennessee average, and back off the water there is real inventory under $80,000. Older homes, small places on wooded lots, and properties a few minutes from a public ramp. You're buying the zip code, not the shoreline. That's the trade, and on a fixed income, it's the right one. There's also a state line advantage here that people miss. You're sitting where 3 states converge, which means you keep Tennessee's no income tax treatment on your retirement money while shopping and getting care across the border in Mississippi or Alabama when it's closer. Corinth, Mississippi is about half an hour, and it has a hospital. Tennessee rules. 3 states worth of options, and Pickwick Landing State Park is right here, a 1,400-acre park with a marina, an 18-hole golf course, trails, and a lodge that got a multi-million-dollar state renovation. Public. Free to walk into. Yours as much as anybody's. Now here's the wild card fact about Pickwick. The lake is named after a Charles Dickens novel. In the 1840s, the first postmaster here was a fan of the Pickwick Papers, so he named the post office Pickwick. The landing took the name, then the dam took it from the landing, then the lake took it from the dam. A 43,000-acre lake in Tennessee, named by one man's taste in books. Here's the takeaway. When you're pricing lake towns, price the town and the ramp separately from the shoreline. The people getting real value on these lakes are almost never the ones who own the dock. They're the ones 10 minutes away who use the public one. Number 2, LaFollette, Tennessee. When I first drove into LaFollette, I had the Cumberland Mountains standing behind the town and Norris Lake reaching out below it. And the combination of that setting with these prices took a while to process. Campbell County is among the least expensive housing markets in East Tennessee. Under $80,000 buys a real house here in town. Older, likely needing a roof or a system, but a house with a title and no lender attached. And what's 15 minutes away is one of the cleanest, most celebrated lakes in the eastern United States. Norris Lake carries over 800 miles of shoreline. 800! Because it's a deep mountain reservoir fed by cold, clear rivers and ringed largely by undeveloped land, the water quality here is consistently rated among the best of any large lake in this part of the country. That is a genuinely extraordinary thing to have 15 minutes from a house that costs less than a new pickup truck. And here's a piece of the arithmetic almost nobody runs. On a lake like this, you do not need to own a boat to use it. Marinas around Norris rent by the day and by the season, and for most retirees, the rental math beats ownership badly. No slip fee, no winterizing, no engine service, no trailer, no depreciation on a machine that sits 11 months of the year. You get the same water on the same afternoons. Rent the boat. Buy the house, not the other way around. Now the honest side, and it's the reason this isn't number 1. Campbell County is poor, services are thin, and the hospital picture in this part of the state has been unstable. The nearest emergency care is a real drive from parts of the county, and Knoxville is about 45 minutes for anything serious. Price that drive honestly before you fall for the lake. Now, here's the wild card fact about Norris Lake. The dam that made it was the very first project the Tennessee Valley Authority ever built, completed in 1936. Every reservoir on this list and every lake town in the state traces back to that one dam and the decision behind it. The first one. Everything else followed from it. Here's the takeaway. Deep mountain reservoirs behave completely differently from shallow valley ones. Less drawdown, clearer water, steeper shoreline. If water quality matters to you, ask how deep the lake is before you ask how big it is. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who does their homework before they buy. So do yourself a favor and hit that like button. Number 1, Butler, Tennessee. When I first drove into Butler, I was up in Johnson County in the far northeast corner of the state, and Watauga Lake came into view through the trees. Deep green water inside steep forested mountains, with almost nothing built on the shoreline anywhere I could see. There's a reason for that, and it's the reason this is number 1. Watauga Lake is ringed almost entirely by the Cherokee National Forest. The shoreline is federal land. It cannot be subdivided, sold, or developed ever by anyone. So while every other lake in the state has been steadily lined with houses for 80 years, this one looks essentially the way it looked when it filled. It is regularly called the cleanest lake in Tennessee, and standing on it, that's easy to believe. Now the money, because Johnson County is among the least expensive counties in the state. Under $80,000 is a working budget here. Older homes in Butler and Mountain City, small places on mountain roads, and property that would cost 5 times as much on any lake with private shoreline, and what you get for it cannot be replicated at any price on a developed lake. There is no wall of condos to look at. There is no neighbor's dock in your photograph. The far shore is a mountain covered in trees, and it will still be a mountain covered in trees when your grandchildren visit. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Butler, and it's the town I promised you at the start. The original Butler is at the bottom of that lake. In 1948, TVA closed the gates on Watauga Dam and deliberately flooded it. the only incorporated town the agency ever fully submerged. Before the water came, they moved 125 houses, 50 other buildings, and 1,281 graves to higher ground. One family reported sleeping in their house on Monday night, having it moved with the furniture still inside on Tuesday, and moving back in that evening to find the ice in the refrigerator hadn't melted. The town rebuilt itself on the ridge above the water and named itself the town that wouldn't drown. There's a museum in the new town that keeps the whole story, and during low water, the foundations and roadbeds of the old one become visible under the surface. A town that was drowned on purpose and then simply declined to be gone. And honestly, of every place on this list, it's the one I'd move to myself, with the drive to Johnson City priced in and my eyes fully open about the remoteness. Every town on this list has the one thing the expensive lakes quietly stopped offering: water you can use without paying somebody for the privilege. And here's the real lesson, the one I want you to carry out of this video. Almost everybody shopping for lake retirement is shopping for the wrong thing. They're shopping for a dock. But a dock is a structure you maintain, insure, and repair, attached to a house that costs 3 to 5 times what the same house costs 10 minutes inland, and it buys you a view that a federal drawdown schedule can take away for 4 months a year. You are not buying the lake. Nobody buys the lake. What you're actually buying is proximity to it, and proximity is nearly free. Every lake in this video has public ramps, public parks, and public shoreline. The retiree with a paid-off house 10 minutes back and a boat on a trailer uses that water exactly as many days a year as the person who paid $700,000 for the dock and has $300,000 still sitting in an account. So price the town, not the shoreline. Check the winter pool, find out who owns the far shore, and drive the route to the nearest emergency room yourself before you sign anything. If this changed how you think about buying on the water, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment telling me which of these 7 lakes you'd pick. If you already live on a Tennessee lake, tell me what your winter view actually looks like. That answer helps people more than anything I can say from here. If this one hits 10,000 likes, I'll do a part 2 on the lakes that didn't make this list and why. I'll see you in the next.